Thank you to everyone who has introduced themselves so far. Like I mentioned, this event is a new event we're trying out in preparation for the career fair. If you have not registered already for our in-person career fair, which is going to be next week, Thursday from 3:30 to 6, or 3 to 6, feel free to register in the chat, in the link that I just put in the chat. I'll add this link again at the end of the presentation. One nifty thing is that you are able to see who is coming, like who as an employers are coming before you go. So that way you can start kind of make a game plan or figure out who you want to tailor your resume to. So we are going to get started. It's now 6:02 and I want to be considerate everyone's time. So we're going to get started with the presentation. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. What if we can't make it? That's okay. We're going to have another career fair with many of the same employers come spring quarter. So hopefully you can make the spring quarter one. But even if you can't make it, this is still a very valuable resource of tonight's presentation. So thank you everyone so much for joining. My name is Ellie Santanato. I am one of the career advisors at the Career Center. So if you do, all of us career advisors will be there at the career fair next week. And so if you see me or anyone else who is hosting one of these career prep events, feel free to stop by and say hi to us and let us know that you came to one of our events. But this evening we're going to do a quick workshop on prepping our resume. So basically we're just going to go over some tips and tricks on how to update our resume for the career fair next week. If you're able to give me a quick thumbs up if you're ready to get started, and if you can see my screen just with kind of like the gesture function. Perfect. Thank you so much. So the first thing we want to review with you all is, what is a resume? A resume is a marketing tool, and its purpose is to convey our personal brand and exemplify our qualifications for a job. And a myth that we want to debunk here in the Career Center is that it doesn't have to include our entire work history. So we want to be selective about what kind of experiences that we are including on our resume. And we want to think about experiences in a broad sense. And so for some of us, we may be first-year students, and when we were in high school, we never had a part-time job, or we didn't do much work outside of maybe like babysitting or being a camp counselor. So we can really think of our experiences and employable skills and experiences as student involvement, maybe cut some of the content that we're working on in our classes. It doesn't have to be the traditional part-time job or internship. And we really want to think strategically about what information we want to leave behind. And so once we take a look at the employers, we might be realizing, okay, I'm really going to focus on maybe the nonprofits coming to the fair. And so maybe my tech and design projects might not be as applicable to the nonprofits that are going to be here. And so that might lead you to a question of asking, is there a right way to make a resume? Here at the Career Center, we think not exactly. It's kind of up to you. Something that we do at the Career Center is we have career communities. And so we have the belief that your major doesn't equal your career. And so within our kind of career cluster, career communities, we might have some best practices for one type of resume over another type of resume. So your resume should emphasize who you are as a unique candidate. Therefore, it's not as simple as filling out a template or copying a sample you found online. And so to avoid doing that, we're going to go over some of the best practices that we have here. So what should you include on your resume? Some common or standard information included on a well-crafted resume is your education section. So if you're a current student or a recent graduate of your college education, you might want to mark it at the top of your resume page that you are a student. This elevation, by placing it higher towards the top of our document, we will make it so that employers see it very quickly in their quick glance at our resume. The information we want to include in this section is our school, degree, graduation month and year, and other relevant details. We don't need to include that we've been in school since September 2020 through June 2024. We can just leave it as our expected graduation is June 2024. We can also highlight select experiences that exemplify our most relevant skills. So we want to illustrate ourselves as successful with those skills via accomplishment statements. We're going to go over more of this on the next slide, but as we kind of prep and prepare, we might be more familiar with the word accomplishment statements as bullet points. And then headers are really important. So so as a hiring manager is looking at a resume, they know what to expect. And we can really get creative with what headers we're using. And for us, one header that we use might not work for someone else. One header is not one size fits all. We can also consider honors and awards. So highlight how we're academically different or involved in different ways with the community or student involvement. And finally, let's highlight our skills. So although our skills are going to be infused throughout the entire document, AKA in those bullet points / accomplishment statements, we might want to consider having a standalone skills section, which calls out our most relevant strengths. We want to avoid using soft skills in this section. This section, if we were going to have one at the bottom of our resume, should focus on more of those transferable skills. And so for a quick breakdown, we have 3 types of skills. We have hard skills, transferable skills, and soft skills. We can think of soft skills as more of our personality traits. So are we empathetic? Are we a natural leader? Are we a natural team builder? Those also kind of fall into maybe some transferable skills, but it's something that's kind of innate to us that we're naturally strong at. It's more interpersonal too. Then we have transferable skills. So this is a mix of hard skills and soft skills. It are skills that may come naturally to us, but we still have to practice and develop these skills so they become strengths. And so this can be writing and editing, photo editing, budget planning. So it's all something that we had to take time and maybe took a class on to develop. And then our hard skills we can think of as technology pieces. So computer programs, is there software that we use? If we do any statistical analysis, do we use a specific type of statistical analysis program to do that kind of work? If we're a graphic designer, what kind of graphic design programs do we use? Those are all kind of considered hard skills because we need another tool to complete that task. Languages are also considered a hard skill just because it's something that really takes time to practice and develop. So like I've mentioned previously, we really want to think broadly here. So in terms of experiences that we can include on our resume, everything on this slide is something that we can do. So it's volunteer experience, past and current jobs, campus involvement, academic and research projects, as well as job shadowing opportunities. Okay, now the how-to. This is how we write bullet point statements. So on our resume, we want to avoid large chunks of text. It makes it harder for the hiring manager to do that kind of glance through review. And so we want to avoid paragraphs. We also want to avoid I statements and make it more action oriented. So we always start our bullet points with a verb. So we can consider this the what. So what is the skill that you demonstrate? And then once we have that verb set, we can think of the how. So how did you apply the skill? Describe the work that you did. Most bullet point statements that you might see online will definitely include the what and the how piece, but we always recommend that you add on the why piece at the end because it just elevates your bullet point to the next level and adds a little bit more context to what you were doing in that position. And we can think of the why as what you did to do it. What were the outcomes? Another way I like to phrase it is the results. And so because of what you did anything change? Are there actionable items that like was an outcome of the work that you were doing in that position? So in summary, accomplishment statements are bullet pointed text under each experience entry. A successful accomplishment statement goes beyond simply listing your responsibilities and duties to illustrate the times when you had made an impact through the application of a marketable skill. In short, accomplishment statements are evidence that support your claim to being a great candidate. And we already reviewed the 3-part formula. We want to focus on transferable skills. So going back to what I was talking about a couple of slides ago, skills that can be easily transferred from one environment to another tend to be high on employers' wish list. They can include everything from Microsoft Office or language skills to your ability to collaborate or problem solve. So as you can see, it's a mix of those hard and soft skills. Some of them require those computer programs. Some of them are maybe a little bit more like personable to each of us. So what are some commonly sought after skills that we might want to consider adding to our resume? Communication. Highlight both your written and verbal communication skills across diverse audiences. You can highlight communication in that skill section or in a couple of bullet points. Resourcefulness and adaptability. We want to demonstrate our ability to problem solve, as well as signify our ability to adapt and contribute to new situations, which could look at addressing an organization's pain points. We also want to notify teamwork / collaboration. So think about the times when you have led or collaborated with a team. One recommendation I always make when advisees come and they're like, I don't know what to write for my bullet point. Well, what are the different populations that you work with within that experience that you're trying to describe? Is it customers? Is it your coworkers? Is it your classmates? Is it your professors, your teachers, other administrative staff? We can write if we interact with all of those different populations within one experience, we can write a bullet point for each of those interactions. And then we have technology skills. So again, like I've said a couple of times, we just want to note the software and other tech skills that we possess. So here are some examples about how we can format an internship as well as a project on our resume. And so I always recommend starting with a position title to begin with. That way employers kind of know what some of your previous work history has been. And then noting maybe where you have worked and then noting the organization. Some people like to switch it, note the organization and then the position title. Either way is correct. It's just kind of a personal preference, but we typically recommend having the position title first. Then this example doesn't have it, but you want to mark how long you've been doing this position. And so it says March 2020. We probably would want to add a dash here that says through present, especially if it's an internship that we still have. Since let's say it was like a 3-month internship that you started in March and ended in like June or May or June, we could say March 2020 through June 2020. And then we have our bullet points here. So I'll read off one just as an example. We have created an Instagram and TikTok campaign promoting safe social distancing practices for Gen Z college students in Chicago. It really hits on those points of, okay, here's our verb created. And then what was our what? Well, our what was Instagram and TikTok campaigns. And then what was the why? To promote safe social distancing practices for Gen Z college students in Chicago. And then here's an example of a paper. So we have the paper title. We can note what kind of paper it was, or maybe the class that we had to write the paper for. For projects, you don't really have to note how long it took you to write that project. I typically just recommend you put the month and year that the paper was due in. And then for one more breakdown of an example, we'll go for this top one. So collect is our verb. And then for our how. And then for our what, we have data regarding recidivism rates of incarceration males and females in Europe and United States prison, with a special focus on Belgium. And then that special focus on Belgium is kind of that third results piece of kind of adding that little extra detail in there. So going into a little bit more detail about featuring projects and assignments on our resume, we can have 4 different types of projects, or we consider at the Career Center that there are 4 different types of projects. So most common are research projects. All of us are writing essays for almost all of our classes, especially if we're an LIS student. So we can think of these as our midterm papers or our final papers. So even if we aren't conducting and collecting the data ourselves for the research, we're still researching other scholarly articles to put into our final papers, or those articles that we had to read in class. It's still grabbing information out of those pieces are still doing research. So research projects demonstrate our skills in data analysis, problem solving, and attention to detail. Then we have volunteer projects. And so these are a great way to showcase the skills and the social or community issues that are meaningful to you. So volunteer projects could come up in student involvement. If you're a part of any student org groups that has a real focus on community involvement, or just your personal volunteer adventures. Then we have creative projects. And so this is going to be more for our graphic designers or our animators, if we have any of those in the room tonight. Creative projects really demonstrate our ability to create design and content relevant to a wide variety of careers. And then lastly, we have technology and design projects. And so this is going to be for more of our computer science or our user experience majors. These projects really showcase your skills and knowledge of softwares and other tools. If you have a little bit of extra space, or maybe a lot of your previous experience doesn't necessarily add up to what you're hoping to do after graduation, and you're kind of making a career change or what we would call a career pivot, you can add a summary statement. Or maybe you're just looking to take up a little bit more space in your resume so you can hit that 1 full page. A resume summary is usually placed at the top of a document and introduces your major qualifications and alignment in the role. It is optional, I want to make that clear. But the resume summary can help establish an immediate claim about your skills and help the reader see your experience and context. We really recommend that if you're bilingual or multilingual, that you add this at the top of your resume, because most language sections are there at the bottom where we're highlighting our skills and technologies. And so if we can highlight up at the top that we're bilingual and what language we're bilingual in, it's gonna set off like a yellow light in the hiring manager's head, and flag your resume for a good job. So as an example, I'll read off this top one here. We have cinematographer, videographer, and storyboard artist, producer, and editor. So hitting kind of those maybe like 4 areas that the student is applying for, with experience in feature film, documentary filmmaking, political media, and commercial advertising. And this is maybe what they kind of focused a lot of their film courses on when they were a CDM student. So now we're going to talk about the resume design. We've kind of gone over what kind of content we can include. And now we have to figure out, okay, how am I going to design this content so it's appeasing to the eye, but also very readable. The goal of your resume is to make it easy for the reader to scan very quickly for the most relevant and important experiences and skills. Use formatting, so boldface, type scale, strategic use of our white space to make the key information easy to find. And so we want to showcase, be sure your job title stands out and clearly describes your role. So that's along with the recommendation of having your position title go before the organization name. I usually recommend that you bold it as well. And then we also want to play around with kind of that white space. So how much space are we taking up between each of our positions? using white space to create chunks that ease the density and help the rimmer skim vertically. We really want to make use of our vertical as well as a horizontal space. And then we want to, again, bringing back that all the way at the beginning, we really want to make sure we're highlighting those most relevant examples. So you can include class projects in your experience section, but going back again, a couple of slides, format it like a job experience, because again, you're developing those skills and you have those strengths from our academic classes that make us qualified for these positions that we're going to want to apply for. So overall, formatting through the use of white space and formatting techniques like bolding and italics, we make it easy to zero in on the specific information we want our busy readers to see. And then this is just a really great example of how we can organize our resume, especially if we're a current student or going to be a recent graduate. We have our header up here at the top in bold, our name, as well as our contact information. So phone number, email address, and then if we have a special LinkedIn URL, we can put what that URL code is. And then we go into our education section. So noting what we're getting our degree in, if we have any minors, as well as some of the relevant coursework that we may have taken that might be for the position that we're applying for. And then we go into our experiences. So what have we done during our academic years? Again, we can think of these experiences as more than just internships and part-time jobs. It can be community involvement. It can be school involvement. And then we have an example of a project here. So, you know, showcasing what we do outside of school or showcasing again more of what we do in school. And then our technology section. I find it's really important that we can note the kind of parent program. So Microsoft Office, for example, and then in parentheses, noting what specific programs within that kind of parent program that we're skilled in. Just because it provides a little bit more information and then we're not missing any like keywords potentially. So resume real estate. In most cases, you only have one page to convince a hiring manager that you have the skills and experiences that make you a great candidate for the role. This means that it's important to use that space wisely and to maximize the amount of relevant information you provide while not overwhelming the reader with content. So on the example we have on the screen, it kind of has like one of those 2-column designs, but it's not really utilizing the width of the page because of the 2 columns. Our bullet points don't get to be as detailed as we want them to be. And if they are as detailed as we want them to be, they fall under onto a couple of lines, which takes up more space. And then we can't add as many relevant experiences as we may want to. And then we have an entire like third of the page that's just taken up by our name and contact information. But we have all that vertical space in between the two that we really could include information on. So this resume leaves out a lot of real estate on the table and fails to fully capture the quality of your experience. Information architecture. So the goal of your resume is to make it easy for the reader to scan very quickly for the most relevant and important experience and skills. Like we reviewed on the other slides, we can use different types of formatting to really utilize the space. And we can establish hierarchy via these tools. So vertical position. This is going back to having your education section at the top of the page. The scaling, so having our headers be maybe a larger font size than our position titles or our bullet points. Bolding, italics. I always recommend that you italicize the location of a job or experience that you may have had while bolding the position title you have. Some people prefer to underline their section headers, and then using dividers. And so if you're on a PC, one of my favorite keys is to hold down Shift, and then it's going to be the key above the Enter button. Or if you're on an Apple, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to hold down Shift, and then it's going to be the button above the Return key. And if you hold down those 2 buttons, you're going to get a perpendicular line. And so I think that's a really neat divider to kind of separate chunks of text out. So This is an example of a resume here on the right side of the screen, and it's visibly overwhelming. This person might be a graphic designer, so they're trying to show off their graphic design skills, but my eye doesn't know where to look, and I'm not able to really scan out what are the important experiences that they're trying to highlight. Is it their education? Are they different jobs? What about these activities over here? It's too much information, too much graphic information. So to expand on the readability and immediacy, the design of your resume is a big factor in the reader's experience and comprehension. You can labor over word choice and accomplishments to include, but unless you have considered the design of your resume, you risk the reader skipping over the most important content. So on average, recruiters only spend about 6 seconds reviewing a resume. And we want to consider how we read as well. So we read in an F-shaped pattern. So this is starting in the left-hand corner to the right and then down. And so we want to keep that in mind. So this is kind of another example of those 2-column resumes. We have a little bit more utilization of that left column, that first third of our paper, in terms of utilizing the vertical space. But it's still not that easy to scan, because if we consider how we read, I'm reading the contact information or the profile, but my eye wants to keep going along the page, but it's cut by an invisible line. And suddenly I'm reading their profile statement, but I'm also learning about their education. So that's why we want to do a mix of that linear vertical space as well as horizontal space. So what kind of fonts do we want to use? A poorly chosen font can make or break our chances of being taken seriously as a job seeker. So we kind of want to avoid maybe Comic Sans here. And when we're considering what fonts to use, we want to consider, there are 2 different types. So we have serif font and sans serif font. So serif fonts are easier to read in print. So this is going to be Times New Roman or maybe Cambria. These fonts are generally considered the traditional or serious ones. And then we have sans serif fonts. So these are often easier to read online. And we consider these to be more cool, modern, and cutting edge. If we look at the 2 different kind of examples we have, sans serif tends to be the ones that have more curly Q kind of edits to them or additions to them, whereas sans serif tends to be more of the blunt, linear kind of text like Arial or Calibri. And then we really want to stick to as close to 11-point font as possible throughout our resume. So what I typically recommend is that section headers are 12 or 13 font, position titles and organization and dates are between 11 and 12-point font, and then our bullet points are 10.5 font or to 11-point font, again depending on how much space we need to take up or amount of space we need to save. And then we want to avoid these trends. Having a profile photo on our resume is a very popular and correct if we are in Europe. But in the United States, we don't really use any photos on our resume. And then skill visualization. And so we think of skill visualization as like this example here, highlighting bubbles about how skilled we are in something. And what we think that we're doing is telling someone how skilled we are in a subject, but what it actually comes off as from a hiring manager's perspective is that we're telling them how unskilled we are in a subject area. So I would read this as that we're 2 out of 5 bubbles in all of these skills. And as a hiring manager, I would be like, why would I want to hire this individual who's only 2 out of 5 bubbles skilled in these programs when I want someone 5 out of 5 bubbles filled for this particular position that needs to utilize these programs. We could also consider A/B testing our resume. So as you're applying for roles, feel free to A/B test the different versions of your resume and solicit feedback from recruiters, hiring managers, and network contacts. And then this also kind of provides that spectrum of, on the left-hand side, we have that more traditional resume, and on the right-hand side, we kind of have one of those more creative resumes. And so if you're in a more artistic field, maybe you want to go the more creative route, whereas if you're in a more traditional field like business, education, nonprofit, government, you might want to go more towards the traditional route where there isn't a lot of room for quote unquote creativity. And then just to kind of keep an eye on time, if you want to join us for any of our other career prep week events, we have a strategy planning workshop tomorrow at 1 p.m. and then next week, Wednesday at 6 p.m. And this will also be happening on Zoom. And then if you want to come talk to us in person, figure out kind of what you want to wear for the event, Monday next week in the Loop at our Career Center office there from 10 to 2 p.m. You can kind of get a sense of what to wear. And this will also include resume critiques. So after we talked tonight about our recommendations at the Career Center, go home, make some of these edits, and then come talk to us in person, either Monday in the Loop or Tuesday here in Lincoln Park. And we can do a quick resume workshop or a quick resume review with you all. And then for those of us who can make it, our winter career fair is next week, Thursday from 3 to 6 p.m. in person here in Lincoln Park at the Student Center in that big auditorium room on the first floor. You won't be able to miss it. So I'll take a moment to leave the QR codes up on the screen so you can feel free to register or save the links to register after our event this evening. So I'll give you about 10 more seconds to do that. And then, as I mentioned all the way at the beginning of our presentation, we do career communities. And so we want you to think beyond your major, especially if we have maybe a more interdisciplinary major versus a vocational major. So opt into a career community to receive exclusive email alerts, targeted job and internship postings, tailored industry resources, career advising, and more. Once again, regardless of our major, we can explore multiple career communities and attend events across all industries. And so you'll develop a great network of future opportunities and learn about a variety of career paths. And so we really want you to think about your major and how you can apply your skills and knowledge into all of these different areas. And then if you want to come and speak to us, but it's not between the hours of 9 to 5 and you don't have an appointment, we do have an asynchronous career resource library called the Career Library that you can get to by going to go.depaul.edu / the Career Library. We have 50 plus handouts, a couple of 2-minute videos focused on every kind of career readiness topic. So anything you want to talk to us about in maybe a 30-minute advising appointment, you are likely to find a quick resource on it to kind of start to explore these kind of different content areas of being career ready. So that is our presentation this evening. My apologies for starting to rush through. I just wanted to be cognizant of our time since we are about 6 minutes over. Before you head out, does anyone have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand, unmute yourself, or put it in the chat. Okay, great. And then one final thing. We have an exit poll for you this evening, so I'm going to launch that. Feel free to take it on your way out. And hopefully we'll see you next week for our 2 walk-in sections, either here in the Loop or in Lincoln Park or in the Loop. And then we'll see you next week, Thursday, at the career fair.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I don't know if this was brought up at the beginning of the meeting, but what about QR codes? Are those okay in resumes if you have a website?
Like, are you asking to like make a QR code or if you should include it on your resume?
Yeah, like what would you say is that a good idea if you have a website that outlines your works and your projects and
We've been seeing it more and more, and it's one of those things because I've been seeing it a lot as students will create a QR code for their LinkedIn profile.
Mhm.
And then if you're a major that like a graphic designer and you have a graphic design portfolio, I've also seen people doing it that way. It's kind of one of those new things that you have to kind of A/B test it. So maybe have a resume draft that just has like a very cleaned up version of the URL code. So that way someone could Google it. And then have another version where you have that QR code on it. So maybe on the bottom, instead of like, you just have a couple of QR codes listed, or next to in your header section, like you have a LinkedIn and then you have a very like very like microscopic like QR code is another option that I've seen too. Another thing that you could do too is if you have that kind of like cleaned up URL, is we always want to save our resumes as PDFs and submit them as PDFs for our online applications. And so what we can do too is once it's saved as a PDF, go back in and make it a clickable PDF. And so we can create a hidden URL. So that way the person reviewing our resume on the computer will be able to click on that kind of cleaned up URL and it'll take them directly to our online portfolio.
Okay, that sounds really good.
Okay, good question, Erica.
Thank you. Would you recommend having like maybe a business card with the QR code and then with a paper clip attaching it to your resume for a career fair?
Yeah, that's such a good idea.
Okay. Okay.
And that would be kind of a cleaner, instead of having the QR code then on the resume, it's like, okay, it's a separate document, and because I'm handing it directly to you in person.
Right, right. And are people still for the online career fairs, are they still printing out their resume on a nicer piece of paper, like on a harder piece of paper? Would you recommend still doing that?
Yeah, so in person, we want to print out a couple of copies of our resume. Our in-person career fairs are really the only time where you're really gonna have an opportunity to turn in your resume, like in person. Outside of a career fair, we're really looking at entirely online applications.
Okay.